Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was the son of Apollo and guardian of Hades' children. Minato Namikaze was an alias, used unwillingly by a punished Apollo. Once he realized what had happened, the god struck a deal. 15 years later, Naruto Uzumaki is taken from the leaf by the god. 7 years after that, he takes his post as the guardian of Hades' children. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 1. Sun's Heir, Death's Guardian. Konohagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the leaves, was a beautiful village. Buildings of intricate designs stood tall and proud earlier that day. That is, until they attacked. Pain. The user of the Rinnegan, the self-proclaimed god, the leader of the Akatsuki and the enemy of Konohagakure no Sato, had destroyed the village with a single attack. Their best warriors quickly fell in battle against the Six Paths. All hope was lost. And then he returned. Naruto Uzumaki, the child of prophecy, Konoha's #1 knucklehead ninja, and the Jinchuriki key of the Kyubi no Kitsune, returned from his training with the toads of Mount Myuboku. He fought bravely against the one that attacked his home, destroying the revived bodies used in place of Pain's true form, and nearly unleashing the wrath of one Kyubi no Kitsune. Unknown to the villagers, the last part was stopped when an apparition of his father appeared in his mindscape. His confidence in himself restored, Naruto fought valiantly against the last remaining path, Deva. Once the sixth body had been defeated, Naruto went to the source of it all and he convinced his distant relative, the crippled Uzumaki Nagato, that peace wouldn't be found through pain. Naruto was rewarded for his actions by the revival of all who had fallen in battle against pain. And now we come to the return of Konoha's hero, who had just collapsed under his own injuries, both internal and external. Get the hell out of my way! Tsunade barked as she shoved through the crowd of happy villagers. The crowd quickly gave their village leader a clear path and she dashed to Naruto's side. Kneeling at his side, Tsunade put a hand on his face as tears welled up in her eyes. Bright blue pain-filled eyes cracked open and Naruto gave his grandmother a cheeky grin before whispering out, "Hey Bachin, I did it." Tsunade smiled and brushed some of the teen's hair out of his face. "That you did, Gaki. That you did. Rest Naruto." Okay. Sighed out the blonde as he closed his eyes once again. His breathing slowed and his heartbeat was becoming faint. The fifth Hokage looked to her apprentice and her gaze hardened. "Get a stretcher, Shizune. He needs medical attention, now," she ordered, receiving a nod, before looking back to the blonde. "Don't you dare quit on me now, Gaki." Before Shizune could move to do as her master ordered, the sunlight suddenly focused on the downed orange-clad teen. The villagers backed away as a large amount of chakra filled the air, and several shinobi leapt forward to protect their leader. A figure started to manifest over the downed hero, human in shape. As the light died down, villagers gasped and shinobi fell to their knees as the figure's features cleared up. Tsunade stared in wide-eyed shock. The figure, a male by his build, was one of the handsomest men she had ever seen in her life. Tanned, almost golden, skin, lithe muscles visible due his lack of shirt, and wild blonde hair that highlighted his ocean blue eyes. His clothes were odd, or rather, his choice to wear what appeared to be only a white skirt with golden edging along with an expensive-looking belt. The golden sandals he wore on his feet reminded Tsunade of the original sandals her granduncle wore because of her great-grandfather's choice in clothing. The man ignored everyone, though he did briefly glance at some women and their assets, before looking down at the orange-clad blonde. He sighed and scratched the back of his head before he spoke in a foreign language. "Damn, kid, you're just like your mom. Reckless, stubborn, and freakin' suicidal. First things first, I'm getting you out of here." He knelt down to put his arms underneath the blonde's legs and back, picking him up like a child and feeling a swell of pride suddenly fill him. The man smiled softly as the teen relaxed and he looked to the sky, thinking, "Is this how you felt, Dad? When you helped Mom raise Sis and I?" "Hey. Wait. Where are you going?" Tsunade demanded, snapping out of her stupor. The man didn't acknowledge her words and walked towards a bright light. The villagers and shinobi had to shield their eyes, while a few unfortunate Hyuga screamed due to blindness, as he vanished into the sunlight. Tsunade slumped in her place, falling to her hands to keep her steady. I just let him walk away, Tsunade thought with wide eyes before squeezing them shut as tears formed. Naruto, I'm so sorry. Tsunade-sama. A voice made her look up to the weakly moving Kakashi Hatake. What do we do? Despite her tears, her gaze hardened as she got back to her feet. She cracked her knuckles and let a bit of killing intent slip out. First, we recover from Pain's attack, she muttered before her head lifted and she had a fierce look on her face, and then we find that fucker, and save Naruto. Meanwhile, the drive back to New York City from the Hidden Lands was long, but Apollo didn't care. His chariot had taken the form of a 2001 Mustang convertible and he currently had the top down. Apollo kept glancing to the first child he had actually felt some sort of parental love for in over 400 years. The boy had his mother's facial build and a bit of her attitude if their meeting in his mindscape meant anything, that punch freakin' hurt, but everything else labeled him as the sun god's son. A cocky smirk went over Apollo's face. You're gonna be as much as a lady killer as I am, the god mused to his unconscious son, still recovering from whatever happened to him in the hidden continent. Suddenly Apollo heard his phone ring and grabbed the white cell phone, flipping it open and groaning when he saw who it was. Pressing the accept button, the sun god hesitantly said, "Hello. Where in Hades' name are you?" The sky suddenly darkened around him and Apollo swallowed at the flash of lightning he saw. Forcing the worry back, Apollo said, "What's up, Dad? Don't try to skimp around this one, boy. Why did a glacier melt in Antarctica?" Apollo sighed, "Dad, can this wait until I get back? Talking and driving while fun isn't my thing." "What?" Apollo swallowed and made a rash, i.e. stupid, decision. He hung up the phone. A lightning bolt suddenly shot out of the sky and nearly hit the right side of the chariot, where Apollo had plopped the teen warrior. The god gave a cry of surprise and worry for both his chariot and his son. More so the latter than the former. Grabbing his phone, Apollo quickly called his father back. All right. I went to the Hidden Lands." "Happy? And why did you do that?" His father's ire was obvious through the phone and already the sun god wondered how he would get out of this one. Apollo sighed and started to park his chariot somewhere south of New York City. Once the chariot came to a complete stop, Apollo ran a hand through his hair. "Because my son contacted me." "Son? What son?" Apollo groaned as he pinched his nose. There was a reason he never told anyone, save his uncle, and that was under protest, about Naruto. "Do you remember why you sent me to the Hidden Lands, Dad?" the god asked quietly. Zeus snorted on the other end of the phone. "I tried to go the way that God in those scriptures you enjoy did to teach you responsibility," the king of gods replied, "which didn't do much good. You came back much more cocky." Apollo smirked, "Still jealous I figured out time/space transportation before you, old man." "Grr. Get to the point, Apollo." Zeus snapped. Apollo looked at his still sleeping son and smiled. "Well, I did find something," he said softly, whimsically. "A woman, and man. Was she a woman?" "She was as beautiful as Aphrodite, but as hot-headed as Ares, reminded me of Mom." Oh, thought that Shakespeare lad would be the last." Zeus muttered on the other end. "So did I," Apollo murmured as the blonde started to stir. "Dad, I gotta go." "He's waking up." "Fine. But return as soon as you're finished. I want to know exactly what you did in the Hidden Lands." Yeah. Apollo muttered as he hung up once again before starting up his chariot. He scanned over the city as he passed through the sky before spotting the perfect place his son should live in. He grinned. Who wouldn't want to live in a penthouse? The god asked himself. Later that day, the sun shined down through the large windows that were to his immediate right, and Naruto groaned. He rolled to his left side and reached for another pillow to shield his face. "Goddamn Sunday!" the 15-year-old mused with a growl as the sun's intensity seemed to increase despite his action. He scowled and sat up, glaring out the windows at the giant orb of gas. Raising a fist, Naruto grumbled, "One day, I'm gonna find a way to put you out for good." If anything, the sunlight shined brighter for a fraction of a second. The action made Naruto scowl before he started to look around the hospital room, but then it hit him. The hospital room he normally was admitted to didn't have windows that big. The whiskered blonde swiveled his head around to find out where he was when his jaw popped open. He was in what seemed to be a really expensive-looking room, rich blue carpeting covering the floor and a pleasant light tan paint adorning the walls. At least 9 small spherical lights were in the ceiling, and the ceiling itself seemed to be made of fine material. Satin blue sheets kept his lower body decent while silk curtains hung waiting at the end of the wall of windows. The bed he was in felt like a large feather, and it was at least thrice as large as his previous bed, if not 5 times. He saw a large black screen resting on a dresser, and leaning against the screen was a thin plastic rectangle with several small buttons adorning it. Standing up to examine the small rectangle, something white and moving caught the blonde's cerulean blue eyes. There was a note written in a foreign language, but Naruto still could make sense of the strange symbols that read, "Press the blue button." Finding said button, Naruto did as instructed and jumped back in a fighting position when the screen suddenly flickered on. Though he relaxed when a familiar face appeared on the screen, that of his father, the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. The man's smiling face made Naruto smile in remembrance at their initial meeting within his mindscape. His thoughts stopped when the image spoke. "Hey Naruto. You may be wondering where you are, and what I'm doing here, but I'll explain that later. See, the truth is, Minato Namikaze is an alias, a false identity. I'm not native to the Hidden Lands, or the Elemental Nations as you call them. I can't tell you who I really am, not yet anyway, but I can tell you that you're not in Konoha anymore." Naruto gaped, but before he could lash out at the TV, his father's visage continued with raised hands. "Now, I know you're mad, hell, your mother would be, too. The thing is, I need you here in these lands to watch over your half-brothers and half-sisters. I would, but I'm busy with my job, yeah. And my name is Sasuke Uchiha," Naruto grumbled with a twitching eye, severely irritated at his father before beaming, "though the brothers and sisters thing sounds good." 45 minutes later. "Need you to read the books that are next to your bed. If there was another way, I'd tell you, but you've got one advantage most others don't." At this, Minato looked left and right before saying cheekily, "Shadow clones are very useful. Keep that in mind. Oh. And I highly suggest looking in the closet. Sorry I can't stick around, but I've got things to do. See ya around, Naruto." Daddy's so proud of his little fish cake. Naruto felt his eye twitch before he started to grumble, "That son of a gur. He knows it doesn't mean fish cake. Bastard." With a sigh, Naruto turned the screen, which he learned from his father's lengthy speech was a television, off and went to the closet. Throwing the door open, the blonde felt his jaw plummet once more before grinning foxily. Several shirts, all shades of sunlight, hung in front of him, most of them were variations of orange. A white jacket with red flames decorating the edging caught his attention and Naruto pulled it from the hanger. There was a sticky note that read, "The jacket keeps you warm and it's stupid fly. Dad." The blonde chuckled and shook his head at his father's apparent antics as he hung the jacket back up. Naruto grimaced as he looked at the several books that were stacked near the bed. With a sigh, he approached them before remembering what his father had said on the DVD he just watched. Naruto grinned and held his hands up in his favorite hand seal. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," Naruto said with a wide smile as 7 clones popped into existence, all clad in white boxers like the original. Already aware of what he wanted, the clones saluted and went to work while the original grabbed some clothes and went to the bathroom to freshen up. He was at first confused by the single knob and several small patches of holes, but he eventually figured out the functioning of a shower, after a few minutes of trial and error. After his shower, Naruto walked out decked in carpenter jeans that gave him enough movement to use his frog taijutsu and a loose orange shirt. He couldn't find his kunai or shuriken pouches, which greatly unnerved him, but he did find a belt apparently made from his headband, if the metal buckle was anything to go by. To finish his look, Naruto went to the closet and pulled out the jacket his father left him. Slipping it on, Naruto felt a brief chakra surge around him. "Yo, Oyabun, turn the heat down." A clone reading something about the history of the rest of the world outside of the Hidden Lands as he visibly started to sweat. Naruto blinked in confusion before slowly sliding his jacket off. The clones all sighed in relief, making the original eye his new jacket in confusion. The flames seemed to be glistening as a somewhat actual heat came off of them. Huh, that's weird. Oh well, maybe I'll just wait a bit until it's actually cold, Naruto mused before looking at his clones and saying, okay, dispel guys. 30 seconds APA guy you bastards. The blonde collapsed to his knees and clutched his head, frickin' jerks. Naruto pushed himself back onto his feet and walked over to one of the books his clones finished with an intrigued look on his face. Normally, he thought books were evil because he couldn't make heads or tails of the kanji within them. Signs were a bit easier because they weren't as jumbled together. For some reason though, he could read this book. Now, why is it I can read ancient Greek? Naruto thought before something fell out from between the hardcover and the paper around it. The blonde shinobi blinked before reaching down to the small square and picking it up. He flipped it over and felt his heart jump to his throat. The picture was of his father holding a very pregnant red-headed woman, both smiling at the camera. Written on the image in Greek, because it came out clear rather than jumbled gibberish, was, "We're always with you, Maelstrom. No matter what. Never forget that. Dad." Naruto smiled despite the tears falling down his cheeks. Brushing the liquid away, the blonde managed to get out, "That bastard, thanks Dad." Naruto carefully folded the picture and stuck it in his pocket before picking the book back up. He read the cover aloud, "An Idiot's Guide to Greek Mythology. Well, now I have the urge to smack Dad around some more, freakin' dick." After creating more clones to get more reading in, Naruto decided to explore the penthouse his father apparently left him. The living room was much larger than his old one, enough to fit 2 of his old apartments in actually, and the kitchen was more than an icebox with a stove. Opening the cupboard made the blonde frown though. All that was in there was yet another note. "He wants me to go shopping?" Naruto asked with a growl before crushing the note and holding his head when a clone dispersed. Damn it. Well, at least I know the area now. Sort of. Naruto started to go to the door when he realized something. Palming his face, the blonde said, "I don't know what currency these people use." "Oyabun." A clone called before chucking out a small black rectangular object, smaller than the remote that is. Much to Naruto's relief, it wasn't plastic, but a loose leather, so catching it wasn't as painful as he thought it would be. The blonde opened the object, finding another note, and blanched. He could write all these notes but he couldn't stay and talk. Naruto mused aloud. The same clone shrugged. "Maybe he was afraid we'd hit him again," the duplicate suggested. Naruto pursed his lips before nodding in agreement. Yeah, he sure wasn't expecting that punch, might have to give him another to keep him on his toes, the original said with a mischievous grin that was quickly mimicked by his clone. He dropped the look to examine the new wallet, as it had several green paper slips with old, strange-looking men on it which he assumed was the country's currency, thus making it being a wallet obvious, and frowned in confusion when he saw an ID similar to his ninja one in a sleeve. Pulling the card out, he focused on the words, struggling to make a clear phrase, before he succeeded. "Student driver's license, State of New York." Naruto blinked and flipped the card over. "The hell is a driver's license?" "I dunno," the clone replied before their stomachs grumbled in irritation. Naruto groaned and held his before looking at the clone. "Everyone dispel, in 30-second intervals, I'm gonna go find some ramen." "You got it, Oyabun." The clones replied before the one standing across from Naruto dispersed first. Brushing the thoughts aside, Naruto started walking out his door intent on getting some food. 7 years later. Perseus Jackson stared in shock as several arrows struck at the disguised manticore named Dr. Thorn. Inwardly, he thanked all the gods for the interference. Honestly, he had just wanted to get to Camp Half-Blood and have a nice, peaceful time just once. But no, Grover Underwood, his best friend, just had to run into trouble. Not that it was the satyr's fault, but come on. Was it too much to ask for a break from monsters? Apparently so. The hidden monster gave a hiss of pain as he pulled the arrows out. He looked at his friend Annabeth Chase when she sighed in relief. The hunters. To his right, wielding a spear and dressed like a punk, with spiky shoulder-length black hair and electric blue eyes, Thalia Grace groaned, "Oh, wonderful." The son of Poseidon looked to where the arrows had come from, and after taking note of their cloaks and drawn bows, he was shocked when he saw that each of the attackers were girls near his age, some a year or two younger. One in the front, with long black hair and a silver circlet around her head, draws her bow back further, before she spoke, "Shall I end it, milady? You cannot do this." Dr. Thorne snarled, glaring at the gathered hunters with hatred, outrage, and fear in his eyes. "It's forbidden by the ancient law." On the contrary, a young girl around the age of 12 or 13 said from the back, "My quarry are all wild animals, manticore. And last I checked, your species could be considered such. Zoe, you may take dash." "Yo, Auntie Art, sorry but I'm gonna have to cut ya off, right here," a voice cut in, making the gathered group turn to look at a hooded and cloaked figure perched on a large boulder near the cliff's edge. He had his own bow drawn, and it caused several of the hunters to gasp, and Percy wondered if it was a gasp of admiration or something else, because if it was the former, he'd agree. The bow was beautifully crafted in gold like the morning sun, its gleam shining in the moonlight and reflecting onto the hidden male's clothes, and straining its string were 4 equally golden-tipped arrows. The hooded boy's teeth shined from the darkness of his hood from his bow's reflection, and a brief flash of gold appeared where his eyes would have been. Before he let his arrows fly, he said, "Allow me, Auntie. Fall, beast, for the glory of the sport." The arrows were released and met their marks. The manticore roared when they pierced his body, before stumbling backwards. He rested against the wall, and the hooded archer stood from his perch, standing at an impressive 6 feet, before he flipped his bow to face him and then flicked his wrist, causing the weapon to collapse upon itself. The archer placed the bow behind him before approaching the panting Dr. Thorne. What did you do to me?" the monster demanded, glaring at the hooded male with absolute hatred. The archer stopped about 5 feet away from the creature before whipping around and pulling his bow back out, aiming at the hunters with a strange arrow ready. "Down!" he shouted as another golden flash appeared under the hood, causing them to do so reluctantly, before he let the arrow fly. No sooner had he done so, a black military helicopter pierced through the mist surrounding them. The arrow continued and shattered the glass that made the cockpit of the machine, sticking firmly in the pilot's chest. The archer lowered his bow, and his right hand, the one that he drew with, clenched. Percy felt himself shielding his face when the helicopter suddenly exploded. He looked over the edge to see the craft's remains fall to his father's domain before looking back at the archer. "Damn!" the hooded male cursed as the manticore faded in a golden sparkle. "My poison must have worn off. Reveal thyself, man." The huntress that spoke before demanded as she and the others, save for the younger one that spoke, drew their bows. The archer waved them off. Ma, Zoe-chan," he said, making the girl stiffen, "you knew who I was the second I drew my bow." Percy, in either a brief act of courage or stupidity, stepped forward with his blade riptide in his hand. "Who are you?" The hooded archer tilted his head and faced the son of Poseidon. He put his bow away in the same manner that he did before as he started to approach the teen. When he was but an arm's length away, his fingerless gloved hands parted through his cloak and went up to his hood. While others, including his friends Annabeth, Thalia, and Grover, gasped, Percy blinked in confusion when the hood was pulled down, revealing a teen near the age of 17. Spiky golden locks covered his head in a wild manner, like a rock star's, and 2 ocean blue orbs with an inner lining of pure gold around the pupils. One stared down at him. The tanned whisker-marked cheeks suddenly pulled back as a fox-like smile was given to the son of Poseidon. "I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze," the teen started as he offered a hand, "son of Apollo and guardian of Hades' children. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Perseus Jackson." Chapter 2. Percy stared at the offered hand in shock before slowly taking it. As soon as his hand was in the elder boy's, Naruto crushed the appendage in a strong grip while pulling him closer. Percy's free hand clutched the pen-disguised riptide as he felt a wave of something utterly malicious wash over him. He felt as though he was in Hades' presence yet again, although this was not as potent. "I should kill you where you stand, Jackson," Naruto snapped, his eyes flashing gold as they narrowed, "putting my charges in danger. Your damn lucky Auntie Arte saved your soggy ass. Know this, son of Poseidon, your actions will have consequences." "Enough, Naruto," the young girl said as she walked forward. The blonde teen released his hold on Percy's hand and turned to face her with a smile. Percy, while cradling his sore limb, took this time to look over the 12/13-year-old that approached. She was, without a doubt, breathtakingly beautiful with long auburn hair and silvery yellow eyes. Milky skin reflected in the moonlight and he felt his heart skip a beat when she smiled. "Do not gawk at my aunt, Jackson," Naruto warned with a sidelong glance before smiling at the approaching girl once again. The girl stood a head shorter than the teen and smiled back. "Of all my brother's children, you are the only one I enjoy to see," the girl said, making the blonde chuckle sheepishly as he scratched the back of his head. She surprised the group when she slapped him across the face after making that statement. "Ow!" Naruto exclaimed in shock as he cradled his cheek. "What the hell was that for?" "That was for ordering my hunters around," the girl said sternly, referring to when he had ordered them to get down, before another gentle smile crossed her face and she hugged the teen. "It's good to see you again, Naruto." Naruto smiled and gave a crushing hug back. "I missed you, too, Aunt Artemis." Percy felt his jaw drop. That was Artemis? As in the goddess of the moon? Why was she so young? When the two before him broke their embrace, Naruto's hand shot up to catch a flying arrow. He frowned. "Now that wasn't nice, Zoe-chan." Zoe, the huntress that spoke earlier, scowled and drew another arrow, back away from Milady or dash. "Enough, Zoe." "I trust Naruto," Artemis intervened, before looking at the two frightened children standing behind the satyr. The girl looked to be 12, with long black hair hidden under a floppy cap, olive skin, and dressed in bland clothing, something that doesn't stick out when in a crowd. Slightly behind her was a boy 2 years her junior, with the same hair and skin, but dressed more like a friendly 10-year-old. The girl's wide black eyes were locked on the goddess and two demigods. Who, what are you people?" she asked hesitantly. Artemis went to speak when Naruto placed his hand on her shoulder. "Auntie," he said quietly, "I know what you're thinking, but please let me talk to her first." Artemis mused this before nodding, well aware of her nephew's duties, and stepped back before ordering her hunters to set up a perimeter. Naruto walked to the children, giving a glance to the still awestruck Grover, before kneeling in front of the boy. Blue and golden eyes looked into obsidian black, and no one dared to speak. "Nico D'Angelo?" he asked after a moment. The boy nodded, and Naruto looked to the girl. "So you're Bianca, then?" The girl nodded and Naruto gave her a smile. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I've been looking for you two for a few years now." Why? Bianca asked hesitantly. The blonde's smile warmed slightly. "Your father asked me to find you," he said. Before Bianca or Nico could speak, he held a hand up. "I know you thought him dead, and you're right. He is, in a sense, dead. Before I say anything more, I must ask, what do you know about mythology?" Why does that matter?" Bianca asked worriedly, taking a step back. Naruto frowned. "Bianca," he started, "what I have to tell you could make you go insane. It's important that you've got somewhat of a grasp over Greco-Roman mythology." "Naruto," Artemis warned. The blonde gave her a sheepish smile. "Sorry, forgot," he replied before looking back at the elder D'Angelo sibling. "Now tell me, do you know about Greek mythology?" Before Bianca could reply, her brother spoke up, "Like Zeus, Hercules, and all those other gods." Naruto, and many of the hunters, scowled at the second name. "Heracles, is somewhat taboo for me, please don't mention his name again, but yes, you're right. Bianca, Nico, your father is the lord of the underworld." Lord of the, is this some kind of sick joke?" Bianca asked with pale features. Naruto frowned and looked at Nico. "Nico, do you know who I'm talking about?" The excited 10-year-old nodded his head vigorously. "You mean our dad is Dash?" The blonde clapped a hand over the boy's mouth before softly replying, "Names are very powerful, Nico D'Angelo. Never forget that. Now go talk to Grover for a bit, he'll explain things for you." Are you sure?" Nico asked as he glanced at his still frightened sister. Naruto nodded and smiled. "Trust me, Nico. Tell him about that mythomagic game of yours," he suggested. The blonde archer waited for the boy to be led away by the still shaken satyr before turning to the girl. Standing up, Naruto sighed and looked around. How can you stand this place? It's so, never mind. Let's go for a walk, Bianca. Oh okay. The girl replied with a faint blush. Naruto smiled and looked back to the approaching Zoe Nightshade. The girl frowned at his grin and outright scowled when he winked at her. Tell Auntie Arte that we'll be back in a bit, Naruto said as he put his hand on the shorter girl's shoulder before giving the huntress a two-fingered salute. They vanished in a flash of yellow light. Percy, who had seen the flash, cried out, "Hey, where'd they go?" Bianca fell to her knees when they reappeared in the snow-covered forest surrounding Westover Hall. Taking large gasps of breath, she then looked up at the blonde teen, who was scratching the back of his head. "Sorry about that," he murmured before offering her a hand back to her feet. "I tend to forget that other demigods have problems with the hydration. Must be because it briefly crosses into Raijiji's territory." What was that?" the daughter of Hades asked with wide eyes. Naruto grinned. "That was my father's blessing to me, a technique only he and I know," Naruto replied as he helped her stand. "Basically, it's my ability to teleport from one place to the next. Let me tell you, Uncle Herm nearly had a heart attack when I showed him it. I think he and Gigi are a bit jealous of my dad and I." Bianca blinked before holding her head in her hands. "Oh god, this is me going insane, isn't it?" "I hope not," Naruto admitted with a frown. "Lord Hades' children aren't the most stable of demigods. Some Adolf Hitler fella seemed to leave quite the impression on the other demigods." There was a slight rumble and Naruto looked at the ground. "I'm not being offensive, it's the truth." Bianca blanched. "I'm related to Hitler." "Yeah, that's the reaction I was told to expect," Naruto said with a chuckle before patting her shoulder. "Relax, Bianca, I know where you're coming from." "Sort of." "Oh really? I doubt it. First my parents are dead, then my dad turns out to be alive, and now he's apparently Satan," she screamed. Naruto blinked. "Actually, Satan was some stuck-up asshole that took advantage of one of my elder brother's fiction novels, convincing a whole lot of people that they were fact and leading to the rise of the singular metaphysical god we know today," Naruto corrected before shaking his head. "And I thought my dad had an ego. That's beside the point. Let me tell you something. I was in the same boat as you." "How so?" a genuinely curious Bianca asked as she and the blonde started to walk. He chuckled and scratched one of his whiskered cheeks. "Well," Naruto drawled, 22 years ago, when I was born, my dad died in a fight, sort of." "Let me ask you this, you ever hear of the comic book hero Thor?" "Yeah," Bianca replied with a nod before smiling slightly. "I have a few issues. I like to read comics." "Go figure, me too," Naruto replied with a smile of his own that made the younger girl blush. "But yeah, turns out ol' Raijiji was sick of my dad's irresponsibility and sent him to my home about, 40-some years ago. Long story short, dad met mom, they had me, and then they died." "Touching story, right?" "Er, yes," the girl unsurely said. Naruto shrugged. "Hey, they died fighting, and where I'm from, that's honorable," he said before scowling. "Then my old man, being the irresponsible bastard he is, forgot about me for 15 years, only remembering before I nearly died." The blonde trailed off and shook off the urge to break something. "My point is the gods have this law, stupid if you ask me, but it's still a law. They can't raise their demigod children, so instead they made a camp. That's where Grover, Annie, Thalia-chan and Soggy Boy come in." "Those other guys? What do they want with Nico and me?" the raven-haired girl asked. The blonde sighed and scratched his head. "Well, they want you to go to Camp Half-Blood, where you'd be safe from the creatures that are after you and your brother being demigods. You'd learn how to fight, defend yourself, and other stuff I guess." "I wouldn't know, I never went," Naruto replied with a shrug. Before she could ask, Naruto cut Bianca off with a raised hand. "It's a really long story that I don't have time for. There's another option for you though, and if you choose it it's both the best and worst choice you could make." "What is it?" Bianca asked curiously. Naruto stopped walking and faced the younger demigod with a look of complete seriousness on his face. Becoming a hunter of Artemis, he said, making her eyes widen, most likely when we return, Auntie Arte will offer you a place in her group. There's one condition, you can never fall in love. Bianca blinked, okay. If you agree to this, Naruto said warningly, you will be blessed by Auntie Arte and granted eternal youth and immortality, to an extent. You can die in battle, on a hunt, or, if you break your oath, your immortality is cast aside. I don't see how this is bad so far, the daughter of Hades admitted. Naruto sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Gods give me strength. He murmured before grabbing her shoulders, what about your brother, Bianca? What? Did you think he gets to choose, too? The girl blinked before her eyes widened in horrified understanding, you mean? If you choose to go with Auntie Arte, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, there is a high possibility that by the end of this summer, you will never see Nico again, Naruto said gravely. Percy paced back and forth with his arms crossed, where are they? They've been gone for like, 20 minutes. Grover looked up from the game he was playing with Nico, relax, Percy. Bianca's perfectly safe with Naruto. How do you know? Percy asked with a frown before looking at his hand, he could be a spy for Lu Dash. If you even try to finish that sentence, I'll gut you where you stand, Thalia snapped, opening her eyes as she glared at Percy from her spot leaning against the wall of Westover Hall. The son of Poseidon frowned. Okay, what am I missing here? He asked, crossing his arms, why do you two know him? Who is this guy? Just drop it, seaweed brain, Annabeth sighed out from where she was reading yet another Greek book. Where it came from, Percy hadn't the foggiest clue, but she was very into it. No, there's something about that guy that rubs me the wrong way, the dark-haired demigod said stubbornly, he almost crushed my hand. You're lucky he didn't crush your head. Thalia snapped once again, you completely ignored my instructions. Yeah, but I saved them from that manticore, Percy argued. Anything else he was about to say was cut off as a lightning bolt landed right next to him, causing him to jump. You're missing the point. Thalia exclaimed as her electric blue eyes seemed to glow with her anger, you didn't have to attack that monster. You should have made an excuse to get them back inside. Safe in the crowd. Thy anger issues have yet to be solved, Thalia, Zoe said with a smirk, getting a scowl from the punk-dressed girl as she approached the 4 half-blood campers, before facing Percy with a glare, you are requested by Lady Artemis, has he returned yet? The others shielded their eyes as a bright light appeared behind the huntress. It quickly died down to reveal a sickened Bianca leaning against a perfectly fine Naruto. The blonde rubbed the girl's back apologetically before looking up and beaming, Zoe-chan. Sup, Auntie Art wants to see Bianca, I take it. Thy childishness knows no bounds, Uzumaki, the hunter replied with a frown before turning around, Lady Artemis has requested both you and Jackson accompany Bianca. What about me? Nico asked, looking up from his game with Grover and earning everyone's attention, I mean, can I come? Nico, I heard you were missing this character, Naruto interjected before Zoe could speak, reaching into his cloak and tossing a small figurine to the 10-year-old. The boy caught it in his hands and his eyes widened. Hades. But he's one of the rarest ones. Nico cried out, looking up at Naruto with awe, how'd you get it? I'm just lucky like that, Naruto said with a smirk before looking at Annabeth, Annie, why don't you play a game of Mythomagic with Nico? The girl smiled and nodded, while Grover sighed in relief. This game was complicated and he could barely figure it out. Being beaten by a 10-year-old kid 3 times in a row didn't help his ego at all. Naruto turned to Zoe and frowned, you need to work on your people skills, Zoe-chan. Thy wit is not called for, the girl growled before spinning on her heel and walking away. The blonde blinked innocently before frowning once again as he followed her. What did I say? Sit, Artemis said, gesturing to the pillows placed before her. Naruto nodded and did so, causing Bianca and Percy to follow his example. The blonde teen sat tall and strong, as opposed to the obviously nervous son of Poseidon. Artemis glanced over the 2 males, both guarded by a single hunter behind them, before resting her gaze on Bianca. So, young demigod, The goddess of the moon started. I can only guess that my nephew informed you of what I would ask. Yes. Bianca replied quietly, confused by the question's wording. Artemis waited patiently before sighing. And would you accept my offer? Asked the goddess when she realized Bianca was waiting for her to speak. Bianca bit on her lip and glanced to Naruto. The blonde sighed. I'm just your guardian, Bianca, Naruto said. You are your own person and I will support your choice no matter what it may be. And you continue to impress me, nephew, Artemis said with a soft smile. Naruto blushed and scratched his whiskered left cheek out of embarrassment. Behind him, Zoe scowled and her hand went for an arrow. Wait, what offer? Percy asked with furrowed brows. Naruto's embarrassment fell and he scowled in the boy's direction. Despite your time at Camp Half-Blood and all you've experienced, you are still quite ignorant, aren't you? He muttered under his breath before shaking his head and speaking louder. Artemis hunters are all female, Jackson, and most have some sort of relationship to our world. Bianca is a young demigoddess, right in anti-art's domain as she is the goddess of maidens, virginity, and childbirth as well as the hunt and he-moon. Percy Jackson, I am offering Bianca D'Angelo a place as one of my hunters. The goddess cut her nephew off. She will remain as young as she is if she agrees to my offer. What? No. She has to go to Camp Half-Blood. Percy cried out, before he felt that ominous feeling of death return. He gasped as the air left him and his eyes looked to his left only to stare into bright golden orbs. Know your place, son of Poseidon. Naruto growled from where he sat facing Percy, his features unnaturally feral as he glared at the younger demigod. You do not make choices for others, get it through that thick skull you share with your father. Enough. Artemis barked at her nephew, making Naruto shut his mouth with an audible click. He bowed to the goddess while Percy tried to catch his breath as the overwhelming aura of death faded. Forgive me, Lady Artemis, he said with a frown, I lost myself. I understand, the goddess said with a stern face, but wait until my question is answered before you leave to calm down. Naruto nodded, leaned back while much more tense than before. He closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths, ignoring the world around him as he calmed down. The girl glanced at her appointed guardian before looking at the goddess. Lady Artemis, I thank you for the offer, but I can't leave my brother behind. Artemis smiled softly and eyed the blonde teen. Ah yes, I know what it's like to have to keep an eye on a brother. How is my bastard of a dad anyway? Naruto asked out of the blue, leaning back and taking on a much more relaxed position, shocking Percy with the blatant disrespect the older boy was showing, still goofing off and flirting with your hunters and other women. Artemis groaned, answering Naruto's question and making him smirk. Well, I've got a way that might make him a bit more bearable for you. Just tune him out. Have I ever told you you're my favorite nephew? Artemis asked. Naruto grinned with another blush and scratched his cheek yet again. The goddess chuckled before looking at Bianca. If that is your choice, I will respect it. There's always a place for you, though. Thank you, Lady Artemis, Bianca said with a bow of her head. Artemis nodded and dismissed them both before turning to Percy. Well, I think you nailed it, Naruto said as he and Bianca walked out of Artemis' tent. The girl blushed at the praise before looking up at Naruto. Naruto, why are you so violent to Percy? The question made the blonde's shoulders tense, but Bianca didn't notice it and continued, I mean, he seems pretty nice. He did save us from Dr. Thorne. True. The guardian admitted before sighing, I guess it's because he reminds me of what I used to be like, and I changed only after a big tragedy. What happened? Naruto sighed again. I'd rather not talk about it, he said before smiling, but I will apologize to Percy, after we spar once. If I do it now, not only will he not accept it, but he'll become even more suspicious of me. Huh. Bianca sighed before asking, so, how do you know Grover? Naruto chuckled and a hand slipped out of his cloak to ruffle her hair through her hat, getting a groan from the girl. That's a story for another time. Come on, let's convince your brother and Annie to clean up. I have a feeling we'll be leaving soon. Please tell me you're not seriously thinking about this, Naruto groaned out as he stood alongside Zoe and Thalia with a much older Artemis in front of them. The goddess smiled apologetically before looking up at the sky. He's always late during the winter. She grumbled before spotting a bright approaching light. Her arm raised to slightly protect her eyes, while everyone else, save Naruto, turned away. When the light dimmed, the gathered demigods and hunters were granted with the sight of a slightly younger version of Naruto, only with sandy blonde hair that was wavy, standing next to a white 2008 Chevrolet Corvette convertible. "Lil sis. Wazoof." His greeting was cut off by a sudden fist embedded in his gut, belonging to none other than one annoyed Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. The teen demigod had a twitching brow as he pulled his fist from his doubled-over father's gut. "Cough, yeah, nice to see you too, Naruto." Apollo wheezed before changing form, a bright light emitting from him as he shifted into Minato Namikaze's form, still dressed as he was before. "What was that for, this time?" "I was saving you from saying something stupid, like one of those god-forsaken haikus." Naruto groaned with a shudder before smiling lightly. "Mom says hi." Like that Apollo did something none of the hunters nor their beloved Artemis had ever seen. He blushed. The god coughed into a fist and tried to recompose himself. She did. "Yeah." The younger blonde said with a grin. "She also said to be sure to be there on that day." "Really?" Apollo's grin widened and a full-on blush covered his face as blood seeped down his nose. He released another pained cry when Naruto kicked him in the junk, causing Percy and Grover to guard themselves. The blonde demigod stepped back with his arms crossed and a pleased look on his face. He knew that if his father didn't have regenerative abilities, he'd be a dead man. Thankfully, he did, hence, the abusive relationship. "Why?" Apollo gasped out as he shakily got to his feet, still covering his healing boys, before his face became blank and he deadpanned. "You're still mad about those hookers, aren't you?" "Damn straight I am." Naruto roared, making his dad shrink under his wrath. "What in the name of Tartarus is wrong with you? Sending 3 call girls to a 16-year-old. I thought Raigigi was the one who couldn't keep it in his pants." The sun god held his hands up in defense. Hey, come on, Naruto, you enjoyed it didn't you?" "That's not the point, asshole." The younger blonde screamed with a red face before grabbing his father's necklace, and pulling him down roughly. "Give me the keys to the car, before I take them." "You got it." Apollo replied hurriedly before dropping the keys into his son's hands. Naruto released his father's necklace and turned around, walking back to the odd/horrified group. He gave a smile to Artemis. "He's all yours, Auntie Art." Apollo paled and took a step back. He knew exactly what his sister thought about his parenting skills, and Naruto knew he took more damage than he delivered when disguised as Minato Namikaze, as per the arrangement with his father. From the gleam in his younger sister's eyes, he could tell she was plenty mad from what Naruto just revealed. An arrow flew by his head, making any excuses Apollo was about to think up vacate his mind. Only one option remained. "Naruto! You little traitor!" Apollo screamed as he ran towards the forest, a volley of arrows flying after him. "For the innocent!" Artemis cried out as she chased after her brother with an arrow drawn. Naruto smirked and crossed his arms. "Gods, I love these family reunions," he said as he watched his father and aunt vanish into the wood. The blonde chuckled and turned to face the glaring hunters of Artemis. Naruto chided as he held the keys up and the convertible behind him transformed in a flash of light into a city bus. "Last I checked none of you were qualified to drive Solution." "Thou art very lucky, Uzumaki," Zoe muttered as the hunters started to board the machine. Naruto hollowly grinned as his eyes inadvertently dropped to the ground. "So I'm told." The blonde trailed off when a flash of lightning drew his attention. Sighing, he turned to face Thalia, Percy, the D'Angelo siblings, Annabeth, and Grover. The first was who he focused on, as the distant flash was made to get his attention. "I didn't forget about you, Thalia-chan," Naruto said warmly before finding a fist in his stomach like his father before him had not moments ago. The blonde grunted and backed away before his cloak's collar was grabbed and he was pulled down to look Thalia in the eyes. "You have a lot of explaining to do," the daughter of Zeus growled. Chapter 3. There weren't many things Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was afraid of. Fighting enemy shinobi that would kill him in a heartbeat? No. Angering someone of high standing or power? He did that every waking moment of his life. Fighting various creatures hell-bent on killing those he cared about? Never. Explaining to a very angry friend who happens to be a girl where he's been for the past 7 years? A little bit. Answers, Whiskers, Thalia growled as she pulled the son of Apollo further down by his collar to her height, now. In the back of his mind, Naruto heard a voice say, "Hey, wait a minute, isn't she the one that was turned into a tree?" The voice was promptly ignored, for the blonde demigod was well aware of what awaited him if he decided to counter with sarcasm. Years with 2 super strong women with short fuses had managed to break through even his skull. Then there's the fact he wasn't ready to tell his tale, and he really wasn't sure how Thalia would react. Knowing his luck with girls' reactions to his explanations, it most likely wouldn't be pleasant. "Thalia-chan, I would, but the thing is, oh my gods, what is that?" he shouted while pointing at something behind them. As he anticipated, the demigods all turned and prepared for a fight with something that wasn't there. He grinned and turned to leave, running as fast as he could, but for some reason, he wasn't going anywhere. "That would have worked," Thalia said as she held tightly onto the hood of his cloak and making the blonde sweat bullets, "if you didn't use it last time." "Damn." Naruto muttered. "Oyabun said I'd have more time." "Oyabun?" Percy repeated in confusion. "What's that mean?" Thalia's eyes widened and she clenched her fist before driving it through the blonde's head. Before everyone's eyes, Hikomu stood in a cloud of smoke. The daughter of Zeus growled through clenched teeth as she glared at the blonde standing in the bus doors. "Come on, Thalia-chan," Naruto said with a smile, "I'll explain everything after we get to the camp." "Damn right you will," the raven-haired girl spat as she approached the bus, "because if you don't, so help me." Naruto tuned her out as she and the other campers from Camp Half-Blood boarded the bus, turning to the D'Angelo siblings with a small smile. He put his hands on their shoulders. "You two ready for this?" "Yeah." Nico replied enthusiastically as he climbed aboard the bus, sitting near the front. Bianca bit her lip before shrugging, "Sure." The guardian of Hades' children frowned at the elder child's lack of enthusiasm while she boarded before grinning mischievously. He'd at least make the trip enjoyable for her, or he'd scare her shitless. The takeoff was smooth, they made it into the sky and so far they hadn't blown up or crashed. And then Naruto suddenly let go of the wheel and stood up. The hunters questioned his sanity, Thalia cursed at him profoundly, making Bianca cover her brother's ears, Percy and Annabeth silently prayed for their parents' protection, and Grover was batting fearfully. "Oh, relax." Naruto called over the various noises. When no one did, a twitch appeared in his eye and the blonde thought, "No trust. Absolutely no trust in me from these people." "Hey!" he shouted, gaining everyone's attention. He pointed at the driver's seat, where a duplicate blonde sat driving. "This isn't my first rodeo, you know." Ignoring the odd looks from the newer hunters, the children of Hades and Percy, Zoe's glare, Annabeth's envious stare, the now unconscious Grover, and a livid Thalia, Naruto went to where the D'Angelo siblings decided to place themselves and leaned against the pole on the aisle seat, earning their attention. Crossing his arms, he asked, "So, how's it going?" "How'd you do that?" Both asked at the same time, eyes wide with awe. Naruto blinked before throwing a thumb in the clone's direction. "You mean that?" he asked. The two nodded and the blonde chuckled, "Another ability of mine. More from my mother's side of the family, I guess." "Whoa, that's so cool!" Nico exclaimed, "Can you teach me?" Naruto shrugged, "Doubt it, but I could try. Maybe after we get settled into our cabin." Bianca frowned, "But, you said we'd live in our father's cabin. How can you live in there when you're Apollo's son?" "It's part of the gig," Naruto replied with a shrug, "your old man wants you to safe, at any cost. I've got a free pass, so to speak. My dad gave me his blessing a while ago." "So, you're gonna bunk with us?" Nico asked hopefully. Naruto grinned. "Yup, it'll be like I'm your big brother or something," he replied before ruffling the boy's hair. "Sound good?" "Yeah." Nico exclaimed before looking at Bianca, "Isn't this cool, Bianca? A big brother, now you don't have to worry about me." Bianca smiled slightly, almost guiltily, before looking up at a grinning Naruto. The blonde winked and walked away, unaware of the blazing blush he caused to fly up the girl's cheeks. Naruto leaned on the aisle seat in front of Annabeth and Percy, eyeing their closeness before he addressed his fellow blonde, "How's it Hanjin, Annie?" The response was a slap in the side, making him wince. "Ow. That was for earlier," Annabeth said with a frown as she looked at the older boy. "Honestly, sometimes you remind me of the 11th cabin." "Geez, Annie, I've already got one mom," he replied with a roll of his eyes. "How've you been? Any boyfriends yet?" The blonde smirked discreetly when he saw Percy's fist tighten. The look dropped and he focused on the other blonde while he thought, "Good, just a bit more and he'll snap at me. If he's anything like the old me, that is." As for Annabeth, the daughter of Athena, just blushed. "Gods, Naruto. It's been 7 years and that's the first thing you ask me." The elder blonde teen frowned. "No, I asked how you were first. I can see you've started to grow from a cute little girl into a beautiful woman, so it's kind of expectant. Oh, and so I can bash the skulls of any exes you may have. No one hurts my precious people." Annabeth smiled softly at that, before standing to wrap her arms around the cloak-wearing teen. He tensed momentarily before hugging her back, similar to how he did Artemis, much to Percy's growing ire. "I missed you so much." Annabeth whimpered from their embrace before her shoulders started to shake as tears leaked out. "Why? Why did you do it? Why did you have to leave?" Naruto closed his eyes and hugged her tighter, preferring to comfort her rather than answer. It was a hard decision, 7 years ago, but he couldn't say that he'd do it any differently, even with how it turned out for the other boy in their merry group. "That reminds me, Luke's going to pay," Naruto silently raged. "No one leaves his or her friends behind. No one but trash, that is." "Ah." A familiar voice cooed, making Naruto blanch. "How sweet. My little fish cake is making a move already." "You are a dead man," Naruto announced as he released Annabeth and whipped around to leap at his father. The disguised sun god yelped and dove under his son's body, sliding on the ground before flipping to a standing position. The demigod flipped in the air and landed on his knees, reaching behind him and grabbing something hidden by his cloak. "Geez, Naruto, I can't believe you're still so easy to tease," Apollo taunted. The blonde guardian merely narrowed his eyes as they flashed gold and threw something in his left arm at the god. Apollo laughed as he twisted and weaved out of the way of his son's shuriken, though he did wonder internally where the weapons came from. His thoughts were cut off by the sudden braking of the bus, making everyone fly towards the front. Everyone, that is, except for one very pissed off Naruto. He reached into his cloak yet again and pulled his collapsible bow out, extending it and rushing towards his father. Apollo blinked and grinned before pushing his feet into the ground, using what the hidden lands called chakra to stick to the floor. Though, due to a long period of not using the energy, he unintentionally stuck too well, making him a perfect target for the approaching blonde. "I'm gonna make you beg me to stop," Naruto announced viciously with an evil grin that Apollo had seen only on 3 other faces, his mother's, his sister's, and Naruto's mother Kushina. "Oh crap," the god muttered when he saw the look on his son's face before pulling out his own bow, which was just a larger version of Naruto's, and holding it defensively. Naruto swung his bow over his shoulder as if to swing it before ordering the driving clone, "Pull up. Now. Hold on to your butts." The clone shouted over the hunters' and campers' screams and curses. The bus suddenly pulled up from its descent, making everyone fly backwards, and Apollo's eyes widened before he grinned. "That's my boy," he thought approvingly as he tensed himself when Naruto's already impressive speed doubled. Their bows clashed with a loud clang and Apollo laughed when he found himself being forced back into a skid. As everyone else on the bus cursed the 2 blondes, Apollo and Naruto had their own conversation. "Trained with Ares, did you?" the god inquired. The blonde teen grinned, his appearance becoming fox-like. "You could say that," he replied cryptically. Apollo would have asked what he meant when Naruto lifted his foot and kicked him in the stomach, pushing himself back to land where the D'Angelo siblings were. Naruto twirled his bow before collapsing it and putting it away, looking at the 2 to his left with a grin. "To answer your questions on what you'll learn from me, something like that," he said to them, getting a pair of odd looks before Nico voiced his opinion on the matter. "That was awesome," the boy exclaimed before looking at his still frozen sister. Did ya see that, Bianca? Did ya? Did ya? This is gonna be so cool. Bianca could only nod her head dumbly as she stared at the blonde that said he was their guardian. She quickly averted her gaze as she felt her cheeks heat up yet again. Luckily, the action was ignored by almost everyone. Almost everyone. Apollo, still in the guise of Minato Namikaze, grinned, "Thank you Aphrodite, you've just made Naruto's life that much more interesting for me." Naruto, who was ignorant of his spot as his father's newest favorite source of entertainment, approached his steering clone and suddenly backhanded it over the head. The clone vanished in a large plume of smoke and the blonde went to sit down, when Apollo appeared in the seat, his feet on the wheel and his arms crossed behind his head. "I got it from here, Naruto," the god said before waving his son off with a dismissive hand motion, "Go flirt with Thalia or something." Naruto growled at his father before turning around to find a seat. When he did so, he was met with glares from mostly everyone else on the bus, save the D'Angelo siblings. He blinked innocently before pointing at his father, "He made me do it." "Oi! I didn't make you do squat." Apollo called from the front, "Now sit down, shut up, or I'll tell the old man how you were the one that sent him the squeaky toy." Naruto found a seat rather quickly, but unfortunately for him, it was right next to Thalia. The blonde grinned at her nervously, and he jumped when she clung to his arm. It was then Naruto remembered one of Thalia's fears and mentally kicked himself. Said girl was glaring at him for two reasons. The first was from the same reason as before, she wanted answers as to why he left their, Naruto, Thalia, Luke, Annabeth, and Grover's, group, where had he been for the past 7 years, and why was he only 2 years older than when he first met her? And the second was because he made her acrophobia act up big time. Which was the only reason why she was clinging to his arm, his nice, strong, well-toned arm. It made her wonder what else was well-toned. "Stop. Stop right there." Thalia berated her hormone-driven thoughts as she looked away from the blonde son of Apollo and chose to look at her limbs wrapped around his arm before releasing it. She took a few deep breaths in order to regain her composure, which crumbled when Naruto suddenly wrapped his arm over her shoulders. "Sorry, Thalia-chan," he muttered apologetically, "I forgot." "Why yeah, well, you still owe me an explanation, Whiskers," Thalia snapped. Unconsciously, she leaned into his embrace and a minute sigh escaped her lips when his arm tightened around her shoulders. Apollo's smirk widened in the driver's seat. "Oh yeah, I so owe Aphrodite a couple of love songs, maybe Naruto could write a few, and snare a few more girls' heart, hee hee hee." As the god thought this, Naruto, Thalia, Bianca, a few girls at Camp Half-Blood and a young warrior in California sneezed. Back on Olympus, Aphrodite grinned as she looked at a picture of her half-brother's son, the one chosen by Hades to be his children's guardian. Apollo had told her how the boy's life had been so far just a year ago and asked that she give his son what he nor the boy's mother couldn't, love. Needless to say, after a wrenching sob, Aphrodite agreed. "Everything's falling into place," the goddess of love thought with a smirk. Apollo landed Seoul and had everyone disembark, but kept Naruto behind. The blonde stared up at his father curiously as he was given a serious look that wasn't often found on Apollo's face. "What did you want, Dad?" Naruto asked. Apollo bit his lip, before sighing and speaking, "It's just, I've given you a lot more attention than your brothers and sisters." Naruto held a hand up. "Relax, Dad. I can't promise I won't say anything, because without a doubt Sagi will let something slip, but I can promise I won't think myself better than them. They're family." The god of the sun chuckled and ruffled his son's hair, getting a groan from the boy as the bus changed back into a convertible behind them. "You're a good kid, Naruto." "Must be from Mom," the blonde replied with a smirk before walking towards the camp's entrance. "Wait," Apollo called, before tossing his son a wrapped object, "Give this to Chiron." Naruto nodded after he caught the object and turned back to the camp. He lifted his hand up without looking back. "See ya around, ya dick. Little brat." Apollo chuckled out before hopping into Seoul and manifesting some sunglasses. Naruto pulled his hood up as he entered the camp before flashing to Bianca and Nico's side, right into someone's office. The gathered demigods, Percy, Annabeth, the D'Angelo kids, and Thalia, jumped while a wheelchair-bound man with long hair and a beard moved backwards in shock, and a man holding a Coke dropped his can. The latter scowled and snapped his fingers, making another Coke can appear in his hand, before glaring at the hooded newcomer. "And who are you?" he asked, taking notice of Percy's tensing. The hooded teen pulled his hood down, his gold-blue eyes shining with confidence. He stood defensively behind the two dark-haired demigods. "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze," the blonde repeated, making the man drop his Coke again as he stepped back, "son of Apollo and Kushina Uzumaki, guardian of Hades' children and according to the rules of this camp, the new counselor of Cabin 13. Aye, it's you." The disguised Dionysius stuttered out as he pointed at the boy with a shaking finger. "He who walks in shadows, born from light, will raise his arms and lead the fight. The god of wine will cower in fear, as this means his time grows near." Naruto blinked in confusion. "What? Stay away from me," Mr. D ordered, before running around the group and out the doors behind them. He popped his head back in briefly. "Oh, and Chiron, please tell me how it all works out." "Bye." The gathered demigods blinked before turning back to an equally stunned Chiron. "Well, Heir, let's be off then, I guess." "If I may," Naruto interjected before the group could leave. "Chiron, the teacher of heroes, I was asked by my father to give you this." Tossing the disguised centaur the package he was given, Chiron caught it in his hands, carefully unwrapping it before giving off a chuckle. Percy and Annabeth tilted their heads in confusion when they saw what it was. "An iPod?" the son of Poseidon questioned when he saw the familiar small machine in the counselor's hands. Chiron shook his head in amazement. "Ah, Apollo," he murmured before scrolling through the music. Nice choices, how'd he get that song on here?" Chiron," Percy inquired, getting the centaur's attention. "What about them?" The dark-haired boy gestured to Naruto, Bianca, and Nico. Naruto rolled his eyes and pulled his hood up. "I will find our cabin," he told the siblings. "Stay and listen to Chiron. I'll see you later." "Hey, wait a minute, Dash." Thalia tried to add in something, but the blonde flashed away in a bright light. The girl growled and her eyes narrowed. "Damn. Language, Thalia, language," Chiron warned as he rolled past her. "Come, let's give these two a tour." Naruto silently walked through the campgrounds, using his ability to bend light to become invisible, as well as using his cloak's ability to become transparent, making him, in a sense, a ghost. After finding Cabin 13, the blonde swiftly strolled past many other cabins, pausing only to examine that of his cousins in the 8th cabin. One avoided arrow later, he was on his way yet again. He stopped at the 7th cabin, bearing the mark of his father, and took note that all of the campers around it could see him. His disguise useless, Naruto let himself reappear fully, making the campers tense. One camper, with the sandy blonde hair his father usually had in a complexion much similar to his own, stepped forward. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously, moving his fingers to a few of their siblings, signaling them to either get back up or weapons. Naruto chuckled. "It's rude to ask for one's name without giving your own, you know." "True." The younger teen replied. "My name is Lee Fletcher, counselor of Cabin 7. Who are you?" Lowering his hood, Naruto answered. "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, counselor of Cabin 13. The campers tensed and stepped back. The blonde frowned and his eyes narrowed. "I see." "See what?" Lee asked nervously. He was not ready to face a spawn of Hades. "If this is how my siblings react, I can only imagine how the rest of the camp will," Naruto replied before looking to the sky. "Just because I am associated with Lord Hades you assume I am dangerous." No. Well, yeah," Lee finished lamely. "It's, I wonder how your response would be to me being the son of Apollo." The older teen asked wistfully, making the cabin members blink. Lee frowned. "Okay, buddy, first of all, you can't be in charge of Cabin 13 if you're one of us," he said. Before he could continue, Naruto had whipped his bow out and fired several arrows, all of which ended up pinning the Cabin 8 counselor to the wall of their cabin. He started walking forward, which made the campers smirk as they anticipated their father combusting the new camper for intruding on his territory. Their eyes widened in fear when he stepped up to the cabin's entrance, not a sign of a fire on him. Nor were there any signs of illness, another common punishment from their father for intrusion without invitation. Naruto raised his gloved hand as he stood a small bit away from Lee Fletcher, making the teen close his eyes in fear. Instead of an agonizing burn from unholy fire or something along those lines, there was a minuscule pressure on his forehead. Opening his right eye, Lee stared into the amused golden blues of the blonde in front of him. 2 fingers belonging to the cloaked teen were pressing on his forehead, right between his eyebrows. "Foolish little brother," the elder blonde chuckled with a smirk, "why would I hurt family?" Lee only stared with wide eyes, as did his siblings, while their obviously older brother started unpinning him from the walls of their cabin. Naruto brushed his brother's shoulders off and gave him a grin. "Scared yet, didn't I?" he asked cheekily, getting a splutter from Lee. Naruto laughed and patted his shoulder. "Show me around, Lee. I've got a bit before I have to get back to cabin 13. The eldest son of Apollo present went into cabin 7 to start exploring, before he was quickly followed by the others, all of which were bursting with questions and introductions. A bit later, Naruto sighed as he started to look around the 7th cabin, Lee at his side and giving a brief history of it. "And we're tied with cabins 9 and 10 for the most deceased counselors," the younger son of Apollo said. "It kind of sucks." "Gods, you all need training," Naruto muttered as he pinched his brow, getting a frown from Lee. "We train," the counselor protested. "No one, save the hunters, are better archers than us. And when you are forced to fight or flee, what happens?" Naruto barked, stopping as he turned to face his younger sibling. "How often do you turn away from the war god's children, only to be struck down from behind?" Lee frowned. "So what do you suggest?" "Father's only good at archery and medicine, it's all we know." "And you think Dad was just handed that gift?" Naruto asked incredulously. "No. Our old man worked his godly ass off for his archery to be on par with Auntie Arte's. For God's sakes, we descended from the guy that taught Chiron, the teacher of heroes." By now, other members of the 7th cabin had filled the area. Naruto looked at them, his little brothers and sisters. He knew that at most he was the oldest for their generation, and would be the eldest for a long time to come. Then he continued, "I may not be your counselor, but I am your brother. I will be damned before I see or let any of you die by unnatural causes. So, I've decided you are all going to be there when I train the other members of cabin 13. Golden-skinned faces turned pale and several campers stepped back in fear at the announcement. The blonde's eyes shined in determination and he gave them a frown. "I expect there to be no hostility between this cabin and 13, am I understood?" No one spoke. He scowled. "Am I understood?" "Yes." The group repeated. No one dared to speak up against how it was against the rules to order cabins around when you didn't belong to them. Looking to an awestruck Lee, Naruto asked, "Do you agree to this, counselor?" Lee blinked before he realized what Naruto was saying. The younger blonde closed his eyes and nodded. "I agree, brother." Naruto smiled foxily. "Good. We meet at the arena at 7. Naruto left his brothers and sisters minutes after his declaration of their training. Many were scared, others soon became excited, and even more were curious. That evening, Chiron called for an assembly. "Campers," the centaur said, his disguise dropped, "we have 3 new members. All of which have been claimed." The 11th cabin sighed in relief. Things were getting too crowded for them. The sun seemed to pause in its descent beyond the mountains as Bianca, Nico, and Naruto took the stage. The younger two were now wearing the orange shirt of the camp, black jeans, and tennis shoes. Bianca's hat was removed and her hair was pulled back into a loose braid courtesy of Annabeth. Naruto had removed his cloak, and as he stepped on stage, he was eyed hungrily by the campers of cabin 10. An orange muscle shirt that contrasted with his golden skin tone hid a well-defined torso, faded carpenter jeans with 2 holsters taped to either thigh, and combat sandals on his feet. Around his waist was a sort of belt, similar to one that would be expected on Batman, as a member of cabin 11 mused, only it was dark blue and a silver plate with a spiral leaf as the belt buckle. Chiron noticed with subtle amusement as he glanced over the group that Thalia was sending glares to cabin 10. "Bianca and Nico D'Angelo," Chiron announced. The two stepped forward and instantly a yellow-green flame appeared above either of their heads, forming the Helm of Darkness, symbol of Hades. Campers burst into chatter, only silencing when Chiron whinnied loudly. He turned to kneel, "All hail Bianca D'Angelo, and all hail Nico D'Angelo, children of Hades." Reluctantly, the other campers knelt and bowed their heads. Naruto had knelt as well, a small smile on his face as he glanced at the two. Bianca looked like she wanted the ground to open up beneath her, while Nico grinned and bowed back, more like one would after an impressive act or feat. After a moment passed, Chiron rose as well as the rest of the campers before he looked to Naruto. "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, step forward." The D'Angelo siblings stepped backwards as the blonde stepped forward. Naruto took a deep breath before looking up as the symbol of his father appeared above him, the golden laurel wreath. A small smile crossed his face before he pulled his bow out and knelt to the ground with his head dipped. More murmurs filled the crowd before they suddenly silenced. The image above him suddenly was filled with a smaller helm of darkness. The crowd gasped again while Chiron spoke, "All hail Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Apollo, guardian of Hades' children and the counselor of Cabin 13. Chapter 4. Naruto stood up after Chiron's announcement, collapsing his bow and tucking it away. The symbol above him faded away and he smiled softly yet again. He was proud of his heritage and status. It wasn't every day one was the son of the sun god and in the employ of the Lord of Death. What does that mean? A boy that was tall and broad-shouldered asked as he stepped forward from his place standing next to the other Ares campers, "How can he be a member of Cabin 7 if he's Cabin 13's counselor?" "EFFU, that's how," Naruto replied with a smirk, electing a few snickers from other campers. He'd been waiting for a good time to use that comeback, and ironically, it was from one of the children of the god that taught him it, though he did censor himself for Nico's sake. Not that it lessened the glares from Bianca and Chiron. The teen's nostrils flared and his angry green eyes narrowed. "You wanna go, Blondie?" "Nah, I went to the bathroom already," he replied with a shrug before turning to Chiron, ignoring the boy's heated glare, and asking, "So where's the food?" Chiron blinked and gestured to the dining pavilion that overlooked the sea. Naruto grinned and looked at the two D'Angelo children. "You two hungry?" "Yeah," Nico replied, getting a hearty chuckle from the blonde as he walked towards them. Naruto glanced at a still nervous Bianca and put a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, Bianca?" the blonde demigod asked, concerned for his charge. The girl nodded slightly, making him smile softly. "Good. Let's get some grub." With that, he vanished in a flash of light, getting a burst of chatter from the campers. Chiron sighed and looked up at the sky, frowning when he saw the moon start to fall sooner than it should have. Something bad is going to happen soon, Chiron thought with a frown. "I just know it." Naruto, Nico, and Bianca arrived at the pavilion near some space by Cabin 12, which suddenly exploded into green flames, as a black Gothic table rose from the ground. The counselor of Cabin 13 sighed and rubbed his head. "Lord Hades, subtlety is not your forte." "Oh." Nico moaned out as he held his stomach. "I don't feel so good." The blonde demigod put a hand on the younger boy's back and rubbed it apologetically. "Sorry, Nico. I forgot that Raigigi gets mad when I take others with me." "I will never get used to that," Bianca muttered as she rubbed her stomach as well. Naruto gave the siblings a sheepish smile before gesturing to the table. "Take a seat," he said softly, "I've got the food covered." The two Hades children nodded and sat down, Nico on Bianca's left, the girl sitting on the right side's edge near where they arrived, so they could see the other tables. Naruto nodded approvingly before reaching into one of his pouches and pulling out a scroll. The blonde then broke the tape that kept it sealed before rolling it open in front of the D'Angelo siblings. Nico and Bianca looked down at the strange symbols, the latter confused and the former curious. "Here's something I learned back home," the son of Apollo said with a smile as he put his hand on the scroll's edge and channeled some chakra into it. Two large plumes of smoke appeared in front of his charges and they coughed from inhaling it. They stopped as the smoke cleared and a delicious smell filled their nostrils. Nico and Bianca gaped as two steaming bowls of noodles sat in front of them. Naruto chuckled at their shock and awe, earning their attention. The blonde demigod sat down opposite of them. "Well?" he asked. "Go on, and eat up." "But where? How? That's so awesome." Naruto smiled at the D'Angelo siblings' varying responses. I'll explain it later. Just eat. The others are gonna show up soon and I have a feeling that dash. Hey Blondie. Naruto sighed and turned to face the same guy he rudely replied to earlier. Behind him were several muscled boys, all just as tall as the one in front of them. They all shared masculine facial structures, broad shoulders, and impressively large physiques. Golden blue eyes looked up at glaring green, and the teen sneered, "You don't look so tough up close." "The same could be said for you," Naruto replied with a frown as he stood from his seat, nearly matching the boy's height. "I can guess you want to fight." A gleam appeared in the boy's eyes as he smirked. "Yeah. You could say that." "Then it can wait until tomorrow," Naruto dismissed casually, sitting back down. Before the camper could retort, the blonde continued with a smug, "Or would you like to lose in private so your pride isn't hurt, child of Ares?" The teen, and his brothers, scowled. "Fine. Tomorrow. We'll spread the word so your siblings can patch you back together when I'm done with you." "All you had to say was that you wanted an audience," the blonde commented as the boy walked away, his brothers following behind him. His smirk fell and he looked at the two kids. "You're going to watch me fight him?" The two nodded and went back to their meal. Naruto smiled at that and tapped the goblet in front of his seat. "Sake." The cup filled up with clear liquid and Naruto grabbed it, taking a small sip. He coughed it up a second later. "The hell? Sprite. I said sake. How the hell am I supposed to get a buzz from Sprite?" "What's a buzz?" Nico asked, tilting his head as he looked up from his noodles. Bianca frowned at Naruto disapprovingly. The blonde guardian stared at the boy for a few moments before looking at the ground to his right. With a mild glare, Naruto muttered, "Lord Hades, you are evil." In the underworld, the god in question stopped mid-conversation with his wife before grinning. Not one of his usual "I'm so evil and brilliant" grins, but a "something I arranged is going according to plan" grin. Shaking himself from his stupor, the death god smiled at his confused wife and said, "Naruto just found out something I hid in our agreement." After dinner, the rest of the evening was a total bust. Well, that was partially because as soon as he got back to cabin 13, the teen in question picked a corner, curled up in the fetal position, and sobbed hard. While Bianca gaped at the scene, Nico tried to cheer his new brother up, but when he asked if Naruto wanted a drink, the sobs renewed. Eventually, 2 hours later, the two siblings managed to get their guardian into his bed, where he promptly conked out from sheer emotional exhaustion. They then retreated to their own rooms for the night. The first thing the blonde guardian realized as his father intentionally woke him with the light of the sun was that his class started in an hour and a half, and his fight would be in 30 minutes. Naruto groaned and rolled out of his bed, reaching up and behind him to pull his shirt off. He scowled at the article of clothing. "That is the last time I go to bed sobbing over not being able to get drunk," thought the demigod before standing and going to his closet. With a small smirk, he threw the doors open and grabbed a small leather box with a golden laurel crown on it. "Time to put someone in their place," Naruto said as he opened the box and pulled out the object that rested within. "Ready to fight at my side again, Q." Mark Andrews was certain this new guy would be creamed if his half-sister, Clarice, was here, but she wasn't, so he would have to step up. He was ready for the fight, having arrived in his bronzed armor with the Spartan-based helmet atop his head. On his left arm was the large 3-foot-wide circular shield with the Olympian symbol on it, and in his right hand was a sword with a 2-foot-long blade. Currently, Mark was impatiently stabbing at a straw dummy, his brethren from Ares' cabin watching intently. The green-eyed Ares child turned to face the members of Apollo's cabin, who woke at every dawn on the dot, before sneering, "Well? Where is he?" "He'll be here," Lee replied in confidence, glancing up at the filling arena seats. His attention went to the entrance when two certain black-haired siblings walked in. Bianca shyly approached Lee and, after convincing the taller boy to lean over, whispered in his ear, "Naruto is on his way, he said he needed to do something first." The counselor of Cabin 7 nodded and righted himself before telling his cabin mates to go find seats in the audience. Most did, taking the seats near Aphrodite's girls, attempting to get their attention. Lee sighed and rubbed his forehead. Their father's corruption ran strong in some of his siblings. Hopefully, not in Naruto. "Hey! Where is he?" Mark cried out, his blood already pumping. What, did Goldilocks wimp out or something? Take that back. Nico demanded, being held in place by his sister. Naruto's gonna wipe the floor with you. Nico, shut up. Bianca hissed. Her brother paid her no heed. No way, Naruto's not a coward, the boy replied with a frown. He can't make fun of Naruto behind his back, I won't let him. Well, isn't that nice of you, a voice behind the two D'Angelo siblings said. They turned to look up at their counselor, and their jaws dropped. Dressed in a golden armor, Naruto definitely looked like a chosen warrior of Apollo. Around his head was a black cloth, keeping his spiky locks out of his face. The chest plate he wore looked strange, not unlike a bulletproof vest, as it rested over a tight navy blue sleeveless undershirt. Over his hands were equally golden gauntlets that were attached to fingerless gloves of the same color/fabric as his shirt. He had dark slacks on, with his belt around his waist and the ends of the slacks taped from the ankle to midshin, golden shin guards that attached to the sandals he arrived in protecting his feet. However, it was the weapon on his left arm that drew most attention. The shield was incredible, a strange thin kite-like shape just a few inches longer than his forearm. The crimson painted on it was covered by actual blood, and the frightening visage of a fox's face engraved in gold did little to minimize the fear factor. A 5-inch leather handle with a ruby at the end was seen protruding from the shield over his hand. Only 2 people knew what the weapon was outside of the Ares and Artemis cabins. And those 2 were Mr. D and Chiron, both staring in shock. Percy, seated near Annabeth, Grover, Thalia, and Chiron, saw his teacher's face. Hey, Chiron, you okay? The dark-haired boy asked, earning the others' attention. The wheelchair-disguised man had a slack jaw and slowly responded, though it was more of an odd proclamation than a response. The Arcadia shield. Chiron said. Grover's head whipped around and stared before he fainted, falling backwards in his seat. The what? Percy, Annabeth, and Thalia replied. Behind them, seated with the other hunters near Mr. D, Zoe snorted. Thy ignorance is insulting, the lieutenant of Artemis hunters sneered at the 3, the Arcadia shield is the shield of Pan, god of the wild. Pan. Percy replied in shock as he turned to face her, how'd he meet Pan? Thine ears are filled with corn, Zoe snipped at the son of Poseidon, earning the boy's scowl. I merely stated what the shield was, not how he obtained it. How did he obtain it? Mr. D asked in wonder, that is the question, isn't it? A question indeed, a new voice said. The 3 demigods, hunters, centaur, and god turned to see the face of Minato Namikaze, aka Apollo, seated on the ledge above them. He looked down and grinned, well, looky here, Uncle Squid's kid. How's it goin', Percy, the boy corrected with a frown, getting a wave of dismissal from the god. Whatever, Apollo replied before looking at the field. Oh, so it's Fishcake v Hothead, eh? This ought to be good. Lord Apollo, Annabeth spoke up, getting the god's attention, don't you have things to do? Meh, the wonders of shadow clones, the sun god replied with a shrug before looking up and whispering, I just hope the old man doesn't take notice. What's a shadow clone? Percy asked. Apollo smirked. Wouldn't you like to know? The god teased before looking back at his eldest son with a smile, whistled my kid is hot. Wouldn't you say so, Thalia? Zoe. Shut it/hold thine tongue, Lord Apollo, the girls replied before glaring at each other. Apollo's smirk merely widened before he looked at Chiron and Grover, the latter still unconscious while the former was still in shock at seeing the weapon. The god of the sun suddenly froze and groaned, holding his head. His clone had been found out. Ah, crap. He muttered before looking at his brother, hey, D, would you record this for me? I'd leave a shadow behind but I know they freak you out. Humph, what's in it for me? Mr. D asked with a frown. Apollo cupped his chin before snapping his fingers. A week's supply of my best healing ales, if ya know what I mean, the god said with a waggle of his brow. The head counselor mused this before nodding. All right, I'll do it. I expect payment after this though, Mr. D warned. Apollo held his arms out innocently. It's me you're talking about, D, come on, man, where's the faith? Upon the blank stare, Apollo frowned, you're just as bad as little sis. Arrows being drawn hit his ears and the god of the sun smiled cheekily at the hunters. Oh come on, can't a guy have fun? Their collective response was a flat no. Apollo left in a brief glow shortly afterwards, in an effort to avoid being made into his sister's hunter's next target. Mr. D sighed at that before snapping his fingers and making a video camera appear. As the god of parties he had access to most recording machines to catch hilarious, or embarrassing, footage with his elder brother Hephaestus blessing. The god then stood and said in a bored tone, "Will all non-combatants please leave the arena?" Naruto nodded at Lee as he started to lead the D'Angelo siblings out of the arena, while Mark glared at the blonde newcomer. As soon as they were alone, Mr. D continued with, "Then start the fight." Mark banged his fist on his shield, giving an intimidating war cry. Naruto sighed and scratched his right cheek with his free hand. "Look at me, I'm shaking in my sandals." "Bring it on, hothead." "Grr, die." The Ares child roared as he ran towards the blonde with his left hand held up. Naruto shook his head and brought his own left arm forward, so that the shield was horizontally in front of him. Blue eyes closed as the son of Ares approached. He took a minute breath before his right hand grasped the handle that protruded from his shield. "Roar for me," Naruto thought to the hidden blade as he unsheathed it right when Mark brought his blade down. Naruto parried the downward slash with his own upward one and drove his left fist into his opponent's gut. Mark stumbled backwards as the air left him before glaring at the blonde, who held a blade in his right hand behind him while his shield's fox face glared mockingly at him. "Is that all you've got?" Naruto asked his opponent, getting another snarl from the son of the war god. Mark brought his own shield up and charged, preparing to barrel into the blonde's defense and send him rolling. However, Naruto did the one thing he never thought an opponent would do. He took a step to the right, out of his path. Mark growled and skid to a stop well past the blonde, their distance being equivalent to that from when they started. "Too scared to face me head on, sunshine?" spat the current counselor of Ares' cabin. Naruto frowned. "That's the best you've got? Sunshine, really?" he asked Mark. "How original. You dare mock me?" "Nah, I'll leave that to you, you do better at embarrassing yourself than I ever could," Naruto replied with a smirk. As he anticipated, Ares' son roared in anger as he charged forward with his shield up once more. Naruto held his ground this time around and, surprisingly, matched Mark's charge. Their shields collided with a clang, and both struggled to knock the other over. "I'm going to decapitate you," Mark proclaimed as he stepped back briefly before throwing his weight into a second shield bash. Naruto scowled and defended himself, but ended up stumbling backwards. Mark leapt on that as a lion would a wounded gazelle, bringing his shield back to slash once again with his sword. As he turned to avoid the strike, Naruto hissed as the blade grazed his exposed bicep, leaving a faint cut in its wake. He jumped away to avoid the following backhand with Mark's shield. "First blood is mine, newbie," Mark arrogantly proclaimed with a smirk as he faced his opponent. Seems I underestimated you," the blonde mused as he examined the wound. To Mark's, and everyone else's, shock, it started to steam and heal up a second later. Naruto sent his own smirk in Mark's direction, "Or you simply got lucky." Mark's astonishment, matched by those of the other campers, swiftly vanished and he smirked, not arrogantly, but in amusement. "This just got more interesting, all right, Blondie, bring it." Giving a toothy grin, Naruto obliged and ran forward, before vanishing in a flash of yellow just before being in Mark's reach. The war demigod blinked in confusion before swiveling his head around. Where'd he go?" "You lose something?" A voice he really didn't want to hear that close asked from behind him before Mark cried out as a blade pierced him through the back. Naruto pulled his blade out and quickly drove the edge of his shield into the back of Mark's helmeted head, knocking the teen out cold. The audience was silent before Chiron started to clap. It set off an explosion of cheers. Naruto turned to face the crowd as he sheathed his sword, smiling and giving a wave, before looking back down at his foe. Kneeling, Naruto put his free hand on Mark's back before he started to softly rhyme. "My father, Apollo. Handsome god of the sun. Gracious father, Apollo. Heal the harm I've done." A surge of energy shot through Naruto's arm into the wound he caused. The blood on the ground from the teen's front slowly began to seep back into Mark's body, dropping any foreign bacteria it may have picked up. The wound itself slowly sealed before leaving a faint scar, no doubt to leave a reminder of the event. Naruto nodded before looking at his shield and sword on his left arm. Nicely done, Naruto thought with a smile as the eyes of the fox on his shield glowed a lighter red briefly. He looked up as someone cried out his name. The blonde grinned at an approaching Nico, standing and walking towards the running 10-year-old. Behind him, Lee and Bianca slowly followed, both giving smiles of their own. Nico barreled into the teen, giving him a congratulatory hug before smiling up at him. That was awesome. Can you teach me how to do that? That depends on whether or not you can stick with my training, Naruto replied with a smile, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately, but yeah. Sweet. Nico replied. Naruto looked back up as Lee stood an arm's length away from his elder brother. Damn, he said, getting elbowed in the side by Bianca, what? There's no other way to say it. Not around Nico, the girl replied with a frown before smiling softly at Naruto. That was cool. That's an understatement, Lee quipped, whatever you're doing to get that good, count me in. The last time someone made Cabin 5 look stupid was Percy Jackson, but that was because he made a swirly attempt backfire. That's mildly impressive, Naruto mused before smirking at his brother, think you can keep up? Hey, if you can do that, and come out unscathed, I can handle whatever you throw at me, Lee replied with a confident nod. Naruto gave his own before looking up at the area where most of his siblings were. Training starts in an hour, he declared, making the smiling faces nod his way before he faced a slowly waking Mark. The son of Ares was rubbing the back of his head and was now seated on the dirt ground, his helmet at his right with a discarded shield and sword. A tanned hand appeared in his sight and the teen looked up. Naruto gave a small smile, you fought well. Don't get down, I've been fighting kindly ones for years now. Heh, then my loss isn't that surprising, the teen muttered before he accepted the hand and got to his feet with determination burning in his eyes. I want a rematch. Some other time, the blonde counselor replied with a smirk, you need to get that concussion looked at. I can only heal visible wounds at the moment. Yeah, I wondered where that cut went, Mark mused as he scratched at his visible stomach through the hole in his armor. Tisk, look at what you did. Man, I hope Chuck can fix this. Charlie Beckendorf, the head of Hephaestus Cabin, right? Naruto asked with furrowed brows. Getting a nod, Naruto smiled slightly. Ah, good. I'm getting the names down. Although I thought a girl was in charge of Ares' cabin. Clarice or something. Her name is Clarice, Mark corrected sternly before smirking, and she'd kick your ass for sure. You're lucky she's on a quest right now. I see, Naruto hummed before shrugging, well, what's done is done. I didn't expect to have to use my old man's gift against you. You're skilled, but that can always be improved. Humph, maybe, the current counselor of Cabin 5 mused before turning towards his brethren and calling over his shoulder, good fight, Uzumaki. Next time, I'll cream you. If you do, I'll eat my shield. Naruto called back with a smirk. He liked that guy and despite his hot-headedness, the temporary counselor was a good person. Naruto turned back to his two charges and his approaching younger siblings while other campers started to leave. The blonde's smile fell when he noticed Chiron, Thalia, Annabeth, Grover, and Percy approaching. Naruto, please tell me how you got that thing. Grover begged after he pushed his way to the front, falling to his goat-like knees with his hands clasped together. I'll do anything. I'll trim the grass around your cabin, I'll be your personal caddy, heck, I'll babysit on weekends for eternity, without pay. The blonde laughed, as did his siblings, before clapping a hand on the satyr's shoulder. Relax, G. I'll tell you how Arcadia came into my possession. It was a gift on my doorstep. Why it was given to me, I haven't the foggiest, Naruto lied smoothly. He knew exactly why he had been given Pan's shield and it was because of his sage training. Though he may be unable to summon the toads of Mayuboku to his side, he had been able to summon quite a few of his father's symbolic animals. Grover sighed with a hung head, damn. The satyr yelped when Bianca kicked one of his legs, earning a smirk from the others and another round of laughs from those belonging to Cabin 7. Chiron approached next, still in his guise as a wheelchair-bound man. The centaur crossed his arms and looked at the gathered teens before looking at the blonde before him. "A training session, he asked. Naruto nodded confidently. The centaur stroked his beard before nodding. "I'll see how it goes before I give my approval." "Sounds fair," Naruto said before looking at Thalia, Annabeth, and Percy. He glared momentarily at the latter before smiling at the other two. "What can I do for you girls?" Percy frowned, taking note of how Naruto acknowledged him, while Thalia stepped forward with crossed arms. She then extended one arm and poked the teen in the chest, saying, "You owe us an explanation, Whiskers." "You sure that you don't mean me, Thalia?" Lee asked with a smirk, bringing attention to the fact that he knew something about their relationship, and making the other cabin 7 members snicker. It probably didn't help that Naruto talked about his trip with Annabeth, Luke, and Thalia with his siblings, explaining what took him so long to arrive at the camp vaguely. "Stuff it, Fletcher." Thalia snapped with red cheeks before rounding back on the sheepish blonde teen in front of her. Well, Heir, can't this wait until after the training, Thalia-chan?" Naruto pleaded, glancing at his siblings. "There are delicate bits I have to leave out." "That's what she said," a voice cried from the crowd. Lee bit on his cheek to keep from laughing outright, along with the rest of his cabin, while Naruto and Thalia turned beet red. The blonde teen whipped his head to face the group. "All right, whoever shouted just made everyone's life a living hell for the next hour." Naruto snapped with a red face, "You're gonna get acquainted with my favorite form of tour training." "What's that?" a curious Nico asked. The blonde smirked at the boy, a smirk that would have made even Hades, lord of the underworld, shiver in fear. Lee silently cursed whatever idiot sibling had interrupted their eldest brother, while Bianca and Nico swallowed heavily. The other cabin 7 members all paled like they had the day before when their brother asked. Percy pitted the gathered group while Chiron sighed. "I'll go prep the medical tent," the centaur said as he rolled out of the arena. That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.